Welcome back to part 2 of the Unnamed Spy game. So last episode we added a player, an enemy and some guns. But I have one big issue. This is a stealth game that has no stealth. I mean, our player's only weapon is a gun with no silencer. That's like the least stealthy weapon ever. So to make our game more stealth based, I started to work on a cover system. I made it so that you can hide behind props and the enemy can't see you, even if you're in range. And you can know which props you can hide behind because of their color saturation. Now that itself would be enough for any other game, but this is a stealth game we're talking about. So I'm gonna make a moving cover system. So you know how in cartoons, when a character is sneaking around and they hide behind a prop and stand still so no one can detect them, but when they move, they get found. That's basically what I'm making. The way this works is I can click E and hide in the prop and move around at a really slow speed. But if I move in vision of the enemy, he gets alerted and follows me. But I can still stand in front of the enemy and it can't detect me, so I can sneak past him. And once I'm done hiding, I can click E again to unhide. Oh, and once I unhide from the prop, it falls where I left it. And I'm totally not bringing up this small detail because it took me over an hour to implement. Anyways, now that the player can hide, he needs a bit more of this. The first weapon I'm making is a gun.
But doesn't the character already have a gun?
Well, yes, but keeping the stealth aspect in mind, making a weapon that can kill enemies outside of their alert range without detection is kind of OP. So instead of a gun, it's more like a tranquilizer that stuns the enemy, which means turning off its movement and making it unable to do anything. Speaking of stunning the enemy, flashbangs. Now, flashbangs aren't really a thing in 2D. They're mostly used in shooters like CSGO, but I have an idea on how to add them to this game. Basically, I'll fire a really fast spinning raycast around the flashbang when it explodes, and if it detects the player's front collider, it plays the animation, which turns the screen white, and if it doesn't detect anything, nothing plays. Also, it stuns enemies regardless of which side they're facing, as long as they're within the grenade's range. Now that the player has one grenade, why not give him another?
What about a frag?
No, that's too loud.
An incendiary?
Nah, that's not stealthy enough.
A decoy?
That's just useless.
What about an EMP?
That's actually not a bad idea, I'll write that down.
What about the... how in the world do I say this? Style hand grenade?
No, none of these grenades. Instead, I'm talking about the smoke grenade. So to make the smoke grenade, I spent some time in Unity's particle system to make some smoke particles and then made the grenade emit these particles when it explodes. Also, when it does explode, it essentially creates a huge prop around the smoke, making the enemy unable to see through it and detect the player. With all that done, I made some code for throwing the grenades, and with the help of Isaac, created a charge up mechanic to throw the grenades further. That's cool and all, but what's the point of just stunning enemies if you're not gonna finish them off after? So I made a knife. The way the knife works is you can backstab enemies if you're behind them in this collider. Once in the collider, the player raises his knife as an indicator for a successful stab opportunity. And the player can just right click to complete the stab and one-shot the enemy. And if you're not in the collider, he'll just swing his knife and tickle the enemy with a butter knife. Now to make this not too similar to a certain character from a certain game, I made the knife throwable.
But doesn't this go against the principle of no long-ranged weapons, undermining the stealth aspect of the game?
Yeah, but that's why it only does 50 damage and needs to be retrieved every time it's thrown. And if it isn't retrieved for more than 10 seconds, it goes on a 20-second cooldown before it can be thrown again. Also, you can't backstab when the cooldown's active because you lost your knife. This encourages players to not use a knife as a long-range sniper rifle, but instead as a last-ditch option to finish off an isolated enemy. With all these new weapons, the player needs a way to switch between them. So I made a weapon switch script and linked it with some UI, and now you can switch all your weapons. The script actually works very similar to source games where weapons are in classes. So if I want the smoke grenade, I can click 4 for the grenade class and then 4 again to cycle between the choices till I reach the smoke grenade. Now that the player has been significantly buffed, it's only fair we give the same treatment to the enemy. But before I buff the enemy, I need to add some animations, so it's not just stuck in its default pose. And I also remembered to add the climbing animation for the player, which I completely forgot last time. Regardless, these animations are only temporary as this is just a prototype, so please be gentle. With all that out of the way, it's time for some buffs. Right now, enemy collisions cause the player to take damage, which makes zero sense, so I'll give the enemy a baton and make it attack the player only if it's in range.
Nope.
I also added iframes or invincibility frames so the player doesn't get shredded in one hit. Now let's give the enemy some more support because they can only see so far. So I made a camera and a laser that detects the player if he walks past them, unless he's invisible. With that detection, the enemy can be alerted by the cameras or lasers. But this looks really boring. Like, literally nothing is happening. When you imagine a system alert, you probably think of red blinking lights and loud sirens. So to make that, I need to learn about 2D lighting. After making some lights and animating them, I can link them with the alert script, and now we actually have a functioning alert system that has flashing red lights when the camera or laser is activated. Originally, that's all I had planned for this video, but after seeing this scene, I decided no, I really have to add this. I mean, assassins and spies literally always operate in darkness. So I started to work on a new lighting system and made it able to assign lights to a generator. Now these generators control whether the lights can be turned on or off. The player can short circuit these generators with a handheld EMP, which has also been added to his toolkit. On activation, it fries the generator, causing all connected lights to turn off, and for the generator to play this animation. And if that's too complicated for you, you can throw your knife or shoot the lights out to turn them off individually. Now, the enemy isn't aware of its lights and can perfectly see in the dark, which is not possible. So after some research on light-aware AI, I realized that it's way too complicated for someone like me. I mean, what in the world does this even mean? So I entirely scrapped the idea. Until I was told,
Why not make the enemy blind based on if all the lights are off in his room, rather than checking his actual lighting?
this is a really simple solution, but it works. So now each room or area has a light system, which is literally just a big box overlap that detects all the enemies within its system. And if all the lights in the system are off, the enemy cannot see and is stunned. Also, if an enemy moves into the new system, it now follows the rules of the new light system. So it can only go blind when all the lights are off in the new system. But now, the player can't see in the dark, so it's time for more gadgets, like the night vision goggles. To make this, I increase the 2D lighting until it looks like it's flatly lit to make everything visible. And then I apply some post-processing filters over the camera and enable and disable them with a click of a button. I also give the player this neat little sprite when the goggles are active. That's enough time spent on the players and enemies. So let's focus on the environment. We already have ladder and ropes, and since our player can crouch, it makes logical sense to add vents, which is just a square with an animation. But look, I can interact with it and it opens and closes. I also added zip lines because zip lines are cool. So to make that, I made the player lerp from the start to the end position and gave him an animation when ziplining. That's about it for today. Usually I would do a game showcase at the end, but I probably won't for the devlogs because I don't want to spend time making sprites and maps that I will never use and also look bad and don't fit the art direction for the game. That's it for me. Like if you like, dislike if you don't, and goodbye.